Sunday morning, and this Sunday brings us rather muggy, humid conditions. Not so much for me, though, here in northeast Georgia, but in the mid-Atlantic and northeast, yes, it is. And while we may have some scattered showers and thunderstorms running around later today, they are likely to be more numerous and possibly severe on Monday and maybe even on Tuesday, as the severe weather risks cover a large portion of the eastern half of the United States over the next couple of days, and we will talk about that and take a look at what's going on elsewhere and in the long range. Where else can you find such a collection of weather information all in one place? Right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. That's where. And it's brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. Get your truck over there and fill it up with all the mulch, topsoil, and sand you need to make your home or your business look great on the outside. Even if it might not be so great on the inside. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is
omnitruevalue.com.
And Tempest by WeatherFlow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Get it and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. It's easy to install. And, I have two left hands when it comes to doing mechanical things, and even I was able to do it with a minimal amount of headaches. Actually, with hardly any headaches at all. The link the referral link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you make any purchase there, use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, and you will get
a big 10% off.
And that's a good thing.
Yes.
Now let me get myself into the screen here. So it's Sunday morning. It's one of those Sundays, Joe, where I slept really well last night, but got up just a little bit late for me. It was about 7:30, so I've been sort of playing catch up since then. But other than that, we've got a gorgeous day here. Love sunshine. It's the dew points yesterday were down around 60 for much of the day, making it nice and comfortable. And actually, from the standpoint of humidity around here today, it's a shade higher, but it's still pretty reasonable overall. But I looking at the temps and dew points by you, that not the temps maybe not so much, but the dew points certainly have come up considerably.
Well, I will tell you that I do not have a Tempest weather station. If I did not have a weather station at all, I'd probably choose Tempest because it is a very, very fine instrument, and I've heard from what you have said. It is very good, but I have had for several years, or we have had, because it's really Renata's. I got it as a Christmas gift quite a few years ago, but we have a Davis weather station, which has served us very well. And right now, according to Renata on the chat board, 73 degrees here in beautiful Putnam Valley, cloud-filled skies, and a dew point of 71, and you could feel it as soon as you step outside. It was a terrible day yesterday. It's terrible out there today. And Joe, what did I say last week? I said it's not going to necessarily get overly hot, but I'm sure a lot of people, and certainly we did, will be turning on their fans and air conditioners to try to stay cool and comfortable, because not so much of the temperature, but because of the high level of humidity, which sadly it looks like is going to be with us for a number of days to come.
Yeah, and through all of this too, it seems like certainly today we have a pretty large area of severe weather risk across the Midwest, the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, down into the South, and we talked about this late last week that this it's upper trough after upper trough coming into the eastern part of the United States. The one coming for tomorrow and Tuesday is somewhat of a powerhouse, I think, in that it's just sitting there spinning away, and the dynamics look fairly positive for the idea of some strong shower and thunderstorm activity. But up until then, until we get to tomorrow, much of what we've been dealing with Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, has turned out to be mostly scattered in nature, and oftentimes that's what happens in instances like we have, where you sort of put out this generic forecast that says showers and thunderstorms and put a high probability to it. And the problem with wording it that way is that everybody seems to think it applies to everyone for every waking minute of the day. In other words, it makes it sound like it's going to rain all day long. And most of the time in these instances, what happens is that some places get it, some places get less, and some places get nothing at all. And I think that pretty well describes what's been happening the last couple of days.
And indeed, the sad part again is that if you're looking for, if you're looking off to the north and west, here in the northeastern United States, and you're saying stuff, well, there's got to be a cold front that'll help to push all of this stuff out. Unfortunately, because of the upper level wind pattern, it really isn't going to be very much movement. It's a fairly stagnant and humid weather pattern that's going to stay with us again for a number of days to come. So live with it. In fact, Joe, on the experimental 3 to 4 week prog by the Climate Prediction Center, they are saying, and these now are guys who and gals who specialize in long-range forecasts. In terms of probability forecasts, they're hinting that this kind of a pattern may be the not the exception, but the rule for the most part across much of the eastern United States, right on through the middle part of July. Ouch.
I don't see anything other than a pattern that has trough after trough after trough of varying degrees of strength and speed dropping into the eastern part of the United States. And if that's the case, yes, you're probably going to spend more time than not in humid patterns that maybe get occasional breaks when weather fronts have enough of a push to move on through. And that's going to be a problem this week, because this upper low that's setting up over the Great Lakes ain't going anywhere very fast.
Yeah.
So you'll have something approach on Monday, and usually you get these systems will come through and they clean house, and you get a better day the next day where it dries out. But in this particular instance, the upper low just sits over the Great Lakes and rotates for a couple of days. And that's going to probably send another spoke around on Tuesday with the chance for some showers and storms.
Yeah, and I just commented to you off air that, up until last week, we here in the Northeast were, according to the Storm Prediction Center, we were in a region of, quote, general thunderstorm activity. And now, in the last few days, or at least since we last were together on Thursday, now not only are we in more than that, not only were we moved from general coverage to marginal coverage, now a good part of the tri-state area is now indicated tomorrow to be in a slight chance of severe weather. And looking at some of the short-term models like the 3-kilometer NAM, they have one band of potent storms moving through midday tomorrow, and then they've got an even stronger squall line approaching from the west by early tomorrow evening. So whatever we get tomorrow out of this in terms of convection could very well be more than just regular thunderstorms. We could be looking at some storms that could be bringing down trees and power lines. And yes, whenever you have a pattern like this, there's always that slight chance of tornadic activity. So it looks like we're in for a very active day here tomorrow. And as you pointed out, it doesn't end. We may have more of the same to a degree on Tuesday as well.
All right, so we got two questions on the chat board before we get on to the maps. Robert Lomanicki, who I think is a new name on the chat board, I don't recognize, and welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. He says he's got a ball game at 4 p.m. in central Pennsylvania. That's a pretty big ball field to cover all of central Pennsylvania, Robert. What are my chances of good weather? For this afternoon, I'm assuming you're talking about this afternoon. I mean, look, there's going to be risks that there will be some showers and thunderstorms popping up somewhere. I just couldn't tell you exactly where. I mean, I hate to give you a non-answer, but the risk is there. Might you get away with it in your very large ball field? I don't know, but maybe you'll be lucky enough that the storms will form around you and not near you. But I can't say. No one can tell you for sure yes or no. So maybe next time I can give you a better answer, especially if you can narrow it down to a smaller ball field. Frank Scalera wants to know, do we see any heat waves coming up? Well, I'll tell you this, Robert. If we define a heat wave as consecutive day, State College, he says, Robert. Same answer applies, Robert. I don't mean to be sarcastic. It's Sunday morning. But yeah, I mean, the risk is there, and you'll just have to watch the radars and see how they pop up. There's nothing there now. Radars are clean, and we'll show you that in a minute. As far as Frank's question goes, if you're talking about, if you're talking about a heat wave as being defined as consecutive days of 90-degree highs, all right, which in my book is at least 5 days in a row, but I'll even give you the liberal 3 days in a row as a possibility. I would say no. Certainly not this week. It's hard to imagine how you're going to be able to uh, get prolonged heat of 90 plus in a pattern like this.
Yeah, yesterday's Climate Prediction Center outlook, both the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 day outlook for our part of the country, and that includes all of Pennsylvania, lower New York State, southern New England, had us in near normal conditions. If you wanted a heat wave, I don't mean to laugh or chuckle. I mean, this is very bad for folks who live in the zone where they are enduring excessive heat. That's down over Texas and Louisiana, parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma. They are just having one day after another of 100-degree plus temperatures. And now some of that heat extends all the way back to the west. There are areas right near the Pacific coast, all of Washington State, much of the western half of Oregon, and most of California. They, too, will be seeing temperatures probably at or above 90 for many, many days. So just to go back to what we were talking about, it doesn't appear, according to CPC, that we're going to be looking at any extreme heat here, thank God, over the next 1 or 2 weeks. But in the same token, they have us in above normal precipitation through that entire time frame as well. And I said on the 3 to 4 week outlook, that extends from July the 8th to July 21st. The entire Atlantic seaboard is above normal in terms of probability for precipitation, and it's especially so from the Carolinas all the way down through coastal Georgia and into much of the Florida Peninsula as well. However, also during that time frame, and again, this is experimental, probability of temperatures look to be above normal from the 8th of July to the 21st. So maybe if you're looking for a heat wave, I don't know why, but if you are hoping for heat wave conditions, maybe you just might get it, but not until probably mid or late July, if it comes at all.
And on that note, we can start taking a look at what's going on weather-wise on our weather maps today. And we'll start off with the watches and warnings map from the Weather Service. And as Joe pointed out, if heat's your thing, which it's not mine either. I mean, you can always get warm if it's too cold, but it's awfully hard sometimes to cool off when it's too hot. But we do have from Mississippi, western Tennessee, westernmost Kentucky, westward across Texas, southern New Mexico, and into southern Arizona, various areas of either heat advisories or excessive heat warnings that are up. We also have a few pockets. We haven't talked about this in a couple of days because we haven't seen much of it, but we do have a few pockets of air quality issues. In the Northeast, it's up in Maine, New Hampshire, and northern Vermont, and also up in northern Minnesota, and in a handful of counties in northeastern Colorado, and also a couple of counties around Washington State. Not seeing much in the way of adverse weather risks when it comes to flash flooding or severe weather, at least for now, but that's likely to change later today. And as we take a look at the surface map, not much of a flow along the East Coast. Just got weak high pressure or weak lows being analyzed here and there, and dew points pushing up into the upper 60s and low 70s into southern New England. Dew points in the low and even some middle 70 dew points moving down through the middle and South Atlantic states. So this is as of 8 o'clock this morning. Don't have the 15Z map. That doesn't come out for another hour or so. But to the west, here's the cold front. There's a low in southern Minnesota with a trailing front, little point of occlusion low being should be probably there in northwestern Illinois. Warm front that goes from there into southern Indiana, so that sets up for a very interesting warm sector. Very tropical air is surging up northeastward through the middle Mississippi and into the Tennessee Valley. You have dew points, Joe, in the low to mid 70s, starting out the day with temperatures in the mid 70s to around 80. So they're going to see some pretty substantial daytime heating out of this. And meanwhile, here's the U.S. satellite loop. Impressive rotation. Anytime I see rotation in this, in the summertime on the satellite, when I see rotation, that always to me signals that there's going to be a severe weather issue someplace. And actually, you can already see there's some pretty hefty lightning strikes going on in central Kentucky and in just kind of moving into north central Tennessee. So that's the beginnings of some severe weather that we'll probably see later today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pattern. And how many of you out there watching, either on the chat board or some of you lurkers who during the months of April and May into early June were saying, are we ever going to break out of this cool weather pattern? When is it going to start getting warm again? When are we going to start that? Well, I hope you are happy with yourself because you certainly have the warmth, and to go along with that, you certainly have your fair share of humidity as well.
Thomas Saul hitting Super Chat a little earlier in the show. Sorry I didn't mention it until now. Thank you, Thomas. Very generous of you. And I think we just got another Super Chat hit.
I'm checking on my...
on the Super Chat toad board. It's Nick M.
Nick M.
Yes.
Nick M.
And he asks, Joe, historically, how do El Niños like this affect winters in the Northeast?
This is going to depend, Nick. It's going to depend highly on how strong this El Nino that's now in the developmental stage gets. Generally speaking, if you have a strong El Nino and you are a winter weather lover, that ain't good news, because usually what happens is that we get these big storms hitting the coastline of Southern California. They track across the southern United States and then whirl up the eastern seaboard. And you say, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Yeah, it is if you like storms. But also, in the same token, the overall temperature pattern averages above normal. So more often than not, what storms you get in a strong El Nino pattern is too warm for the white stuff, and more often than not, more for the wet stuff. Now, on the other hand, if we have a weak El Nino, one that's, shows signs that we are getting a pattern, thanks to warming off of the west coast of South America, a pattern of a El Nino, but it's relatively small or relatively slight, that tends to bring in storms, but also it is weak enough to allow enough cold air to come in and produce quite a bit of snow. So if you want an El Nino to bring a pattern of snow or wintry weather, you got to hope that the El Nino doesn't get overly strong. If it gets overly strong, like we had, let's say, in 1997, 1998, that could very well mean another year where we'll see a paucity, if you will, of snowfall and winter weather here in the northeastern United States.
And while we're talking about winter on June 25th, much of the country actually right now is having a good deal of sunshine. There's not a whole lot of smoke showing up either, which is a nice thing.
William Huber, by the way, I hate to interrupt, but William Huber on the chat board, Joe Rayo, how many times you used your pool this year? We erected the pool. This is one of those pools, these big oval pools that we put up and take down. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago we put the pool up. We haven't been in it once since. Case in point, either it's been too cloudy, even on days when we had sunshine, the water was very cool. We really have not had any very warm or hot weather making it worthwhile. So the pool has remained covered for the first 2 weeks since we've erected it. And this type of weather pattern, God only knows when we're finally going to, when Bernard is going to jump in. But that's the way it has been so far this year, or this summer.
And I'm looking today, at least you're getting some sun on the northeast satellite view. There are clouds that are starting to bubble up in some places, but the day actually started out with not a whole lot in the way of cloud cover. We're seeing some bands across Pennsylvania. What's left of the upper trough is now, this lead upper trough is falling apart. But there's probably still enough instability that we're seeing these clouds form. And again, the possibility that we could see some scattered storms. Lots of sun, though, in Virginia, North Carolina, down to South Carolina, and also by me. Here's the radar this morning. And there's a complex of storms moving across central Kentucky. You also could see the rotation around the bands that are in the upper Great Lakes in northern Wisconsin and in the upper peninsula of Michigan and back into Minnesota. So if that thing just sits there and spins, you're going to get these spokes that come along. And today's spoke that's going to be swinging across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, and point south is rather vigorous. And it will probably be also vigorous tomorrow as it approaches the East Coast. The Storm Prediction Center for today, and it goes back a day. Here we go. So here's for today, a very large area of enhanced risk. Eastern Indiana, western Ohio, much of central Kentucky, much of central and western Tennessee, northwest Alabama, the northern half of Mississippi, and a good chunk of the state of Arkansas, all under enhanced risk, and an even larger area of slight risk. And by the way, it's always good to just kind of put this in perspective when we talk about marginal risk versus slight versus enhanced, because the word slight doesn't really sound like it implies much. But I think the better way to think about it is if you have a marginal risk, it probably means that there will be some isolated severe thunderstorms where you are. If you're in the slight risk, I think those thunderstorms will probably be, rather than isolated, you might have these scattered clusters of thunderstorms. And then when you start to get into the enhanced risk, I think then we're starting to talk about lines of thunderstorms that maybe go hundreds of miles or so maybe sometimes less, but sometimes they can be a couple of 100 miles long and also far more vigorous in terms of intensity and probably a higher chance that you could see some spin-ups. So and when I mean spin-ups, I mean tornadoes. So that kind of covers that with regards to the enhanced risk today, because the tornado risk is actually being indicated to be rather high in eastern Indiana and western Ohio and north central Kentucky, Joe, about 10% risk.
Right.
And that's the probability of a tornado within 25 miles of any point inside the hatched area, of any point, and in the hatched area of 10% or greater probability of an EF2 to an EF5 tornado within 25 miles of any point. So
it's very unusual. I mean, we certainly have seen 2% and 5%, and even on occasion we have seen 10%. This is the first time I could remember that a 10% area is also overlying a hatched area. That must mean that the folks over at SPC must really, really feel that there's going to be some rock'em sock'em action in that zone later today and this evening. And Joe, I thank the Lord that I'm not in that zone, because I do not. There's one thing I do. People say they chase these things. I don't chase storms, nor do I want to see one looming on the horizon and moving in the direct path of my home. So,
well, here's what I sort of get the chasing, and at the same time, it's not for me. But I'm just scanning through the SPC discussion, and they say supercellular tornado and large hail threats will exist along nearly the entire corridor, and they're referring to the Ohio Valley and points south. That said, potential for strong tornadoes and significant damaging hail should be relatively maximized across the eastern Indiana, western Ohio, and perhaps southern lower Michigan sector, where the supporting Cape shear parameter space will overlap best. In that swath, large low-level hodographs, now they're starting to get super technical here, so I think I'll stop. But yeah, they're pretty bullish here. That's what that translates to. That they're very bullish
Well, further
on
down in that,
thunderstorm development.
further down, they point out that the plume of ML Cape associated with what you just spoke about will be in the 3,000 to 4,000 range. I mean, my God. I mean, here around our part of the country, ML Capes are impressive when they reach like 1,500 or 2,000. They're talking about 3 to 4,000. I mean, that tells you right there that this is going to be a dangerous situation. I would be scared to go out today. And I would actually, and I don't mind saying this, I would actually get down on my knee, look to the sky, and I actually did this with Hurricane Sandy. I remember when I was leaving my house the morning of Hurricane Sandy to go to News 12, I actually looked to the sky and I made a deal with man upstairs. I said, look, if you can somehow manage to avoid, because I live in an area where I'm surrounded on three sides by 50 to 75-foot trees, maple trees, oak trees. I said, if you can somehow manage to avoid having one of those trees come crashing down on my house, I will gladly put up with 4 or 5 days of no power. and sure enough, we ended up with no power, but we were one of the few places in and around Putnam Valley, the town of Putnam Valley, where, I mean, there were a lot of trees that came down. Nothing came down on my property or nothing came down on my house. That's what I was concerned about. And I tell you, if I lived in that zone right now in Ohio or Michigan or Indiana, I'd be looking at this guy and say, please, anywhere but right here, please. It's horrible. And tune in tonight on your national news, either one of the three networks, CBS, NBC, ABC. I'm sure this is going to be one of the top or lead stories, and even the news channels, if they can get off of the political stuff that they've been continuing to spew for all of these weeks and months, and actually get to something other than that in terms of major news in the country. I think we'll be seeing a lot of what's happened or is about to happen in Indiana and Ohio and Michigan with this band, this area that's heading or is expected to develop later today and this evening.
Now, tomorrow, SPC has expanded the area of risk, which, if you've been reading my posts that I've been putting up, which, by the way, I should remind everybody, if you go to the community tab on Facebook, the community tab on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, you can see my website posts from there, or certainly links to my website posts, and sometimes I put other stuff there too. So if you want to read about what's going on, I didn't put up this morning's post yet because I'm a little behind schedule, but it'll go up after the show. So just to check that out, because every day I'm putting stuff up. Besides the videos that we do, I am putting stuff up in the community page on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. So the Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow, there's enhanced risk in southeastern Virginia into central North Carolina, slight risk from South Carolina northeastward up to Long Island, into the Hudson Valley, all of New Jersey, much of eastern and southeastern Pennsylvania, much of eastern and even into central Maryland, over into Delaware, and points southward. And of course, you see the marginal risk goes all the way up into southern Vermont, New Hampshire. The tornado risk tomorrow, though, is not as high, 2%. And I think that might have to do with the fact that the wind direction, among other things, the wind direction being from the south, is probably going to, perhaps make the atmosphere a little less unstable than it otherwise would be, particularly along the coast. But it remains to be seen when we get to tomorrow. Maybe the wind turns out to be more southwest, and these numbers will go up. But there's a 2% risk for tomorrow from Delaware southeastward into central North Carolina, and again, it's mostly wind. 15 to 30% risk of wind gusts of 50 knots or higher within 25 miles of any point. There's no hatched area, but if there were a hatched area, it would be 10% or greater probability of wind gusts of 65 knots or greater. Now, the lack of movement in the upper troughs means that we've got severe weather risk again on Tuesday, and we're starting this off now with a marginal risk in a narrow area along the coast, from the middle Hudson Valley and western Connecticut and Long Island southward into Virginia, North and South Carolina, mainly in the easternmost parts of those states. I'm looking at this going on, it wouldn't shock me, Joe, if this marginal risk area gets expanded a bit for
Yeah, well,
Tuesday.
whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens to what's observed by the SPC tomorrow and tomorrow night, they'll look at it, they'll analyze it, and they say, okay, so now what do we do? Do we, as you just said, Joe, upgrade this beyond marginal and put the tri-state New York metropolitan area, for example, in slight, as is the case for tomorrow? Or do we did we not see what we anticipated on Monday and maybe keep it the way it is, marginal? So whatever you see for day 3, for Tuesday or Monday night into Tuesday night, whatever you see there is going to change in one way, shape, or form, depending upon what happens tomorrow and tomorrow night.
Right, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, I think there's a chance, given what's going on, that we'll probably see this, nudged up a bit when we get there. Now, WPC with the rainfall, they've been kind of sitting on this idea of 2 to 3 inch rainfalls for the next 7 days, and again, I think we need to account for the fact that there's a lot of variability here in terms of who gets what and where, and could there be 2 to 3 inches of rain in some places? Sure, in the Northeast, but there's going to be less along the coast, and it's quite possible even in some of those areas inland, some areas are going to wind up with less. But on the other hand, we do have a favorable pattern for precipitation this week in the firing up of these showers and thunderstorms. So we'll just have to watch to see how they play out. But we could see a decent amount of rainfall out of this. Rainfall amounts of 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches extend down into the deep south, also back across the Great Lakes and into the central and northern plains and into the northern Rockies. So thunderstorm activity working overtime indeed. Now, let's look at. I want to look at what's going on first off for today. Let's go to I always like to look at the 700 millibar maps for a clue as to these thunderstorms and how they're going to play out. So I'm going to load up. We'll see. Oh, they don't have it for the HRRR, so we can't really do it on that one. So, and the NAM for some reason. Let's see if the 3-kilometer NAM is out, because the 3-kilometer NAM is out, so that's good. So we could do the they got
Omega
this
or frontal.
Yeah, let's look. Let's see if there's any Omega. So we'll use the 700. All right, let me roll back here. So sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't. Let's take a look. And I mean, you've got these little areas here. This map probably, I would rather look at that 700 millibar wind map to see where the jet streaks are, because that's usually a good clue. But can't see it on the NAM 3, and the NAM 12 for some reason wasn't. The NAM for some reason on Tropical Tidbits is not coming in. But you see on the NAM 3 today. A line that fires up, and probably way underdone anyhow, but a line that just fires up across eastern Indiana into western Ohio. You look at this and you think, well, why did they go for all that risk? Because it really isn't producing very much. And then even during the day in the east. Now tomorrow, the NAM 3's got a really vigorous line of storms that develops across Pennsylvania, in through New Jersey, and then it kind of falls apart when it reaches the coast into southern New England and Long Island, but remains very vigorous through Virginia and into North Carolina. So, and I kind of think that's probably underdone to some extent, but it's at least picking up on the idea.
Yeah, and even though it does weaken, I mean, this is a machine that is forecasting potential activity or whatever like that. But I mean, if you have some very, very strong storms, let's say at the western New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania borderline, and then the machine is saying that by the time it gets to the New York area, it's going to fade out completely. It ain't going to fade out completely. By sheer momentum, there's still going to be a few embedded strong cells that are going to make its way all the way into the tri-state area. So you have to You have to, in situations like this, Joan, you asked about, why out in the Midwest the machines are not saying what's being indicated by SBC. Basically, the SBC, to a degree, is a CYA forecast. Just cover
Yeah, but
yourself.
I also think I also think, I mean, obviously they watch our show just continue, for all the time, but they also have a really much better handle in terms of the develop how extensive the development will be versus what the machine the models are doing, because the models a lot of times when it comes to showers and thunderstorms, they vastly underdo, or sometimes they vastly overdo, but more often than not in cases like this they tend to vastly underdo. How many times have we looked at the models, showing, just maybe a couple of dots for thunderstorms, and when the time for the radar comes, for the time frame involved, and the radar just is loaded. So,
Yes.
I think they got a better handle. They certainly have a better handle on how this all plays. And by the way, on the 700 millibar, in which, like I said, I like to use this because I always like to look for these little dots of what look like little black and brown dots. Those are jet streaks that oftentimes can indicate, wind shear and maybe the potential for some tornadic activity. And there's actually some going on with those thunderstorms that are over east central Kentucky into Tennessee at the moment, and then those come down late this afternoon into northern Georgia, northern Alabama. But it's pretty impressive there across Indiana and Ohio. I mean, you got some really interesting jet maxes here at the 700 millibar, a level of 60, 70 knots, that are showing up in that zone of enhanced risk. So I think what SPC is saying here is pretty well justified.
Yes, I would agree.
And that upper low, by the way, rotates into tomorrow. So if we want to just move it along, not as many jet streaks for tomorrow afternoon, but there are some. And you see those firing up in eastern Virginia and even over into western New Jersey and even over you. So, what you say about the sheer momentum of it, yeah, I think you might be right. The line may wind up being stronger tomorrow if this is any indication.
Well, depending upon, I mean, the main line or the main spoke of energy is expected to move on in at or soon after sunset tomorrow evening. However, that's not to say that ahead of it there could be some renegade cells of convection. The 3 kilometer shows that quite well. The 12 kilometer NAM doesn't really show it at all. But depending upon what happens prior to the main line moving in late tomorrow and tomorrow night, may actually help to, and this is if you're going against severe activity, if you don't want to see it. I know Leon Probitsky on the chat board says, I hope it gets really active. I hope it gets real exciting tomorrow. That Leon, as long as it's over your house, enjoy. I don't want it over my house, but whatever happens in the midday may actually help to take away a little bit from the activity that may come later in the day or tomorrow evening. But it's going to be an active day, I think, all across the board, depending upon where you are in terms of showers and storms tomorrow. And it's something that you're going to have to watch literally from the get-go right on into tomorrow night to see what heads our way. And I'm sure tomorrow, sometime during the day, any one spot in the tri-state area will go under some kind of a severe thunderstorm watch. So watch for that. And also, if you're on the SPC site, you might want to look at the mesoscale discussions when they talk about and maybe point out that they are considering putting such watches into effect for various areas.
And by the way, the other thing to point out here too is if you look at the track of the upper low from Minnesota over the Great Lakes, at least initially, it looks like it's almost like a bowling ball that's just sort of rolling along to the southeast, and then it just sort of slows down and spreads out and just keeps sending these. I always like to refer to them as spokes on a bicycle wheel. So you see the jet streaks coming in on for tomorrow in the east, and doesn't really move very much going into Tuesday. I mean, it just moves a handful of miles. So another bicycle spoke coming along, and the NAM is picking up on some jet streaks there also on Tuesday, and that trough into Wednesday evening, while it's a little weaker now, is still hanging back to the west. So I would say you probably will see, still maybe some risk for some thunderstorms on Wednesday. And by the way, should also point out that while this trough is, well, come on, there we go. So here's the trough along the East Coast on Wednesday. This here that is out between the south of Bermuda, that is Tropical Storm Cindy, supposedly. And if you follow the upper trough, I mean, if that's correct, it would ride northward off the East Coast and toward Nova Scotia. I know there's been a couple of model runs that have showed this. And actually, the Hurricane Center in their discussion was touching on the fact that some of the global models were showing Cindy weakening and then regenerating again when the wind shear drops off once it gets far enough north. So whether that happens or not remains to be seen. We'll talk about the tropics in a moment. But here's the NAM, and you can see the NAM having those thunderstorms firing up. Let's go back to today first of all. Let's roll it back. Rolling it back just to see what comes out of this for today. And yeah, I mean, there is stuff that bubbles up today. It's mostly inland. There's a couple of cells that fire up near the coast, but it's more inland than anything else. And then for Monday, now here comes that arm, and that swings around. This is Monday morning, and then Monday afternoon into Monday evening. Again, sometimes the models do not pick up well on thunderstorm development. And on Tuesday, showing up with some development inland again, and then moving toward the coast. And then again on Wednesday, we're seeing some showers and downpours that form Wednesday afternoon as the upper trough lies right on the coast. And you see Cindy there coming in from the lower right, passing close to Bermuda as it heads northward, assuming that it winds up holding together, which we're not sure of.
Right. And once again, Bermuda, it's a little island in the middle of, not in the middle, but I mean out in the Atlantic Ocean, but always seems to be
in the crosshairs somehow.
Always. Unbelievable.
All right, longer term, we'll take a look here at the GFS, and of course, I mean, this is such a ridiculously amplified look for this time of year, but that's those are the cards you're dealt. You play with them. The upper lobe. The troughs keep dropping into the eastern part of the United States. This one hangs out. If you believe the GFS, the one that's over the Great Lakes, that's coming into the Great Lakes now, it takes all of this week to go from the lower Great Lakes to New England. I mean, it just literally hangs around the coast right into Friday before it finally lifts away. And it only lifts away because there's another trough that's dropping into the Great Lakes and Northeast for next weekend. This one, not quite as pronounced and actually does a little bit more in the way of moving so that the week of the 4th of July may actually have some sense of normalcy to it for the month. But there's just been this tendency, Joe, for troughs to want to keep dropping into the eastern part of the United States over and over again. And I always say that the trend is your friend. And even though the long-range models, when you start going deeper into the long range, love to show things changing, when in reality they don't, I think that's probably the best case. The best thing is to think about it along the lines of that the trend is your friend until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And of course, everybody is hoping we had, could there have been more perfect weather for the Memorial Day holiday weekend? No. I'm just wondering whether or not we're going to have to make payment on that with the 4th of July holiday weekend. It'd be lovely if we were able to eke out. And it's not even really a weekend, right? I mean, 4th of July this year is when, on a Wednesday?
No, it's a Tuesday, Joe. So it's basically going to be a 9 or 10 day weekend for clever people that save their vacation time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the 4th of July is a holiday that you can't move to a Monday. Okay.
Does it make sense to have a 4th of July holiday on the 7th of July.
Right, exactly. All right, so let's look at Cindy, which, Brett's gone, in case you were thinking it's that mass of clouds that's in the southwest Caribbean is what's left of it. The center just, as advertised, was going to get into that wicked zone of shear in the eastern Caribbean and get ripped apart, and it did just that. Meanwhile, Cindy, the center of Cindy, if you look on this loop, it's a little hard to see, but if you look closely, the center is exposed. The convection is all to the east. The center has now come completely exposed, and that's because it's getting its round of strong wind shear blowing the cloud tops away to the northeast. Now, the Hurricane Center in their forecast is indicating that this is going to weaken to a tropical depression. However, as I said earlier, the global models, and they've been doing this for days, some of them, not all of them, showing it perhaps regenerating once it gets north of, say, 30 degrees north, or maybe just near 30 degrees north, because the shear is going to eventually relax, and if the center can survive, there's a chance that this thing could bubble up again. But for now, the Hurricane Center, I just want to take a real quick check of their discussion, because up until now they're just sort of leading to the idea of this just falling apart. And this is what they say today, talking about degeneration into a trough over the next couple of days. The latest NHC forecast also shows the tropical cyclone opening up into the trough into an open trough in the next 36 hours, and this could happen sooner given how diffuse the circulation is currently, which it is. After Cindy dissipates as a tropical cyclone, there remains support from global and regional hurricane model guidance that Cindy could regenerate farther to the north in several days when the shear begins to abate. But there's enough uncertainty not to put it in the forecast, and I think that's probably wise. There's no reason to put it in. You have plenty of time to figure out whether it is going to happen or it's not going to happen.
Agreed.
Okay. So anyway, I went fishing yesterday.
I saw, and
yes, I caught a nice 10-pound striped bass. I was fishing my local lake here in northeast Georgia, which is populated with striped bass and some hybrid bass, white bass that mate with striped bass, and they make little baby hybrid basses. So I caught a 10-pound bass for catfish also, and the catfish actually gave an interesting fight. It was out on a boat with a fishing guide. But the best part of the whole thing was
having the grandchildren.
Well, no, that was wonderful, but that was wonderful, and my older grandson was so excited because when I got the fish on the line, I pulled him over and put his hand on the reel, and I told him to help me reel it up, and after that he was just like, he saw the fish and he got to hold it, so he was just all excited for the rest of the trip. Because we had 7 fishing rods out there, and he was checking all of them and looking to see if they were moving. But the best part was, Joe, so we were fishing with live bait, and anyway, you got to check your line every once in a while because sometimes the live bait doesn't stay live for too long. Right. So the minnow I had on one of my on the pole I was using was demised. So I took the minnow and I took it off, and then I threw it out into the water, and sort of floated away about 50 yards, maybe less, let's say 75 feet or so away from the boat. And I'm just sort of watching it float. The next thing I see is a magnificent, beautiful bald eagle came swooping down. It was like I was watching a nature show. I was watching David Attenborough on Planet Earth showing an eagle swooping down on the water with his claws, just swooped onto the, skimmed across the top of the water, picked up that minnow, that fish that I threw out, and then carried it off away into the woods. That was better. That was better than catching the fish. I really, that was an amazing thing to see.
I agree. And in fact, 4 or 5 days ago, I had put on my Facebook page a video of an eagle swooping down, grabbing a fish as like your minnow, but grabbing a much larger fish from the water with his talons. And on the way back up, he actually put the fish in his mouth and swallowed it whole.
Nice.
It's an amazing sight to see.
Yeah. And you know what? I didn't get it on it was happened all too fast for me to get this on my phone. But you know what? It reminded me about how we're so focused sometimes on getting everything on video, because we all have video cameras on our phones, obviously. And I remember when video cameras first came out, and I was always being nagged to, make sure you record this and make sure you record that. And I found after a while, and it didn't take long for me to realize, you know what? I'm not here at these events. I'm the videographer. I'm not seeing it. I am not actually experiencing it. I'm filming it. Okay? So sometimes you don't need to really experience the beauty of life on a reel, okay, or on TikTok or any place else. Sometimes much of the time it's better to just put your phone down and experience it for yourself. What are you doing?
Right now, if you put me on the screen, I'm
actually, I had you shared, but now you've just put yourself into a black screen. Can you unshare and share again?
Okay, I'll stop the share, and I'll share.
Try again.
Share the screen here. Does that work now, or?
Now it worked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now take a look, folks. This is that video I was showing. Here's the view of the eagle. And he's coming down. You can see the talons there reaching for but he must see the fish first. And he takes the fish, he grabs it. He's got it now in his claws. Now he's flying up. Now watch what he does. Look at this.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Puts it in his mouth and swallows the damn thing whole. Look at that. Isn't that amazing?
Well, it was an anchovy, for God's sake.
Wow. That to me is amazing, right there.
That is very cool. That is very. They're such regal, magnificent creatures. They really are.
Yep.
Okay, so you now disappeared again. Let me see if
I just unshared.
Okay. No, I know, but I'm just going to try to see if I can get you back on my end. All right, so let's see if I do this. And then I do this. No, that didn't work. So if
Robert Lamnicki, no, it's not 50. It's actually 51 years that Hurricane Agnes hit. That was 1972, not 1973. And that storm that came inland, I think, somewhere along the Nassau County shore area, and eventually ground to a halt somewhere over central Pennsylvania and caused devastating floods in portions of Pennsylvania, especially.
Yes. I'm sorry, Joe. If you could just share your screen and unshare it again, and let's see if I can get you back up on the screen.
Share. And now unshare.
All right. Let's see. Because I lost you. Something happened when you shared the screen. This happened a couple of weeks ago, and I, couldn't get you back.
Well, I mean, if they can
hear you.
They can hear me. I'm not
okay. The voice you hear is the voice of Joe Rayo. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, do you have Briller Jeopardy or do I? I don't have it.
I may not have it either. I don't think I have.
All right. You know what? It's coming up on noon, and I want to go whack some weeds. So, why don't we call it a day? We covered a lot today.
Yeah, yeah.
And we do that every night, Monday through Thursdays at 7:35, and Sundays here at 11 a.m. And I hope you like the show. If you like the show, hit the like button, because Joe and I love it when you hit the like button. Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest, by WeatherFlow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Get it and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, because if you do, you get
10% off.
And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And the website is
omnitruevalue.com. And before we sign off for the morning or for the day, thank you to Thomas Saul, Nick M., D. Carter, and Leon Probitsky for hitting the tip jar super chats this Sunday, the first Sunday of summer.
We'll see you tomorrow at 7:35 p.m. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.